Tonight on Primetime, after fresh missile exchanges, the fragile Iran-U.S. ceasefire is facing another diplomatic test, with Qatar at the center and both sides disputing whether any direct talks are actually happening there. In Doha, even the meeting is now disputed. Welcome to the program. I'm Andi Mioč. Iran and the United States appear to be sending mixed signals over possible talks in Doha this week, just days after missile exchanges tested a fragile ceasefire. Washington says a meeting is on the table, while Tehran insists no direct talks with the Americans have been scheduled.
Both Iran and US have issued opposite statements concerning meeting in Doha this week. Tehran said on Monday that no meeting had been scheduled. It's after weekend missile fire from both sides tested the ceasefire to end the 4-month-old war. However, US President Donald Trump said in a social media post that Iran had requested a meeting in Doha for Tuesday. And the White House says it's sending Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner and his envoy Steve Witkoff to lead the negotiating team, where discussions on the memorandum will continue alongside technical talks.
I think they've already left, or they're just about getting ready to leave. So we'll see how that goes. But we're doing very well on that front. But the meeting in Doha is going to be perhaps important, perhaps not. We're going to find out.
Meanwhile, Iran says it's sending its technical delegation to Qatar this week. But Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghaei said this had no relation to the Americans' visit and that no talks between the two sides were scheduled. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, Kazem Garibabadi, said consultations with Qatar are continuing on issues including implementation of the agreement, and that formal technical talks will only begin once both sides agree on the date, venue, and necessary conditions. Separately, Garibabadi said Iranian and Omani experts will soon begin discussions on redefining transit routes through the Strait of Hormuz, adding that Iran would seek to obstruct vessels traveling outside the designated shipping routes.
Meanwhile, Iran has pushed back sharply against French calls for a role in the Strait of Hormuz, insisting it remains responsible for keeping shipping moving under the ceasefire deal with Washington. Tehran also says there are no plans for direct talks with the United States this week, as tensions remain high over NATO, the IAEA, and the aftermath of the war. Turaj Shiralelu reports from Tehran.
Iran's foreign ministry strongly rejected remarks by the French President Emmanuel Macron on reopening the Strait of Hormuz, stressing that under the ceasefire deal with the United States, Iran is responsible to facilitate shipping traffic in the region. Spokesman Esmail Baghaei said that no foreign intervention is required in the strategic waterway, also warning that it will only lead to aggravation of the existing conditions. Speaking at a weekly press conference on Tuesday, he urged the French government to stop taking a stand on every development in the region, saying this practice will not buy Paris any diplomatic prestige. Replying to a question, the spokesman confirmed that Iranian and US delegations are not going to meet this week to discuss the roadmap for implementing the ceasefire agreement. Asked about US officials' remarks on a meeting in Doha, Baghaei said that the Iranian delegation will only meet Qatari officials with the working agenda of releasing Tehran's frozen assets. To another question, the official stressed that Iran is determined to legally pursue participation of the NATO member states in the Israeli-US war against the Islamic Republic. He said Iran was aware of NATO's role in the war and added that the remarks by the Military Alliance's Secretary General was an open secret. Baghaei said that both the NATO chief and the countries that had a role in the military aggression will be held accountable for assisting the Israeli-US war with Iran. The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman also reiterated Tehran's position on suspension of cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency and urged its chief, Rafael Grossi, to abstain from issuing politically loaded statements after failing to condemn attacks on Iran's civilian nuclear sites under UN verification. Baghai stressed that Iran has no plans to cooperate with the UN nuclear watchdog on inspecting its nuclear centers destroyed by the Israeli-US air raids, but that Iran will continue its obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Turaj Shiralilu from Iranian Foreign Ministry, Foreign News.
Well, to discuss this, we are now joined by Sara Kira, founder and director of European North African Center for Research. Sarah, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on Primetime. Now, with this interim deal in place and sporadic exchanges of fire, there's a lot of uncertainty, with the latest example being this Doha meeting. How is this being perceived by audiences in the broader region?
Well, actually, audiences in the broader region, all of the countries involved in this region have been severely affected by this conflict. So everyone is hoping for a peace deal, or at least a ceasefire, a true ceasefire that would give this region a little bit of relief after the closure of Strait of Hormuz. Actually, a lot of countries have been affected, especially economically, the whole world, because of course, of the oil supply and everything, and all the goods that have to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So every single state in this region has been involved one way or another in this conflict. So we would really like relief, and that's why we actually find a lot of mediators, even from the affected countries, by this kind of conflict.
Now that you mentioned mediators, beyond what we're hearing publicly from U.S. and Iranian officials, the threats and messages of defiance, would you say that work continues through those mediators and back channels?
Well, actually, the back channels and those mediators are extremely necessary in this kind of conflict, because we have one regional power like Iran and another superpower like the U.S. involved in a vicious war. This war actually started off with casualties from children and a lot of tension. Actually, you would feel the huge tension we feel in the region here because of this war, because it's just very close to us, and we're all affected. So the role of the mediators now is very necessary, and each and every mediator has a role to play. Egypt, with its institutional, of course, experience, intelligence, and Egypt is a regional power itself. And we have Oman, who's the facilitator of these talks and is trusted by Washington and Tehran. And we have also Pakistan, who's playing a huge role in this conflict. Actually, we have seen a lot of diplomacy, witnessed a lot of diplomacy in this conflict from Pakistan. And Qatar is doing a huge job in mediating and facilitating this kind of communication between Washington and Tehran, because they make sure the communication is still open in case any escalation happens. This war would go out of hands, and no one wants that we reach that point or that kind of escalation. So actually, huge work, huge diplomacy, negotiations, back channels. And as long as the mediators are involved and as long as the back channels are open, this actually gives hope of peace and gives hope even if the conflict takes longer in time. Most importantly, that it doesn't go more dangerous or longer in time than this.
And Sarah, you've listed there the advantages of all those individual mediators that have mediated in recent Middle East conflicts. How has the role of such third parties evolved? Have they become essential for any peace talks?
Very, very, very essential, because no peace talks can actually be done with. We have been witnessing a lot of confusing statements from both parts, from Tehran and Washington. And as I mentioned, as long as the back channels are open, there is hope to reach a peace deal or to put down the danger of this war and the effects and the consequence of this war on the region and on the world. So back channels open is essential, is totally necessary to proceed on with the talks, to achieve better communication so we can reach at the end to common ground between Washington and Tehran. And of course, Israel is involved as well. They are playing a huge role in stalling any kind of peace deal that would be signed between Tehran and Washington because they have no interest in that.
And sir, there's also a separate process regarding Lebanon. The Americans managed to get Israeli and Lebanese officials to sign a document, but how effective of a mediation would you say that is if Hezbollah, a warring party, did not sign on?
Well, actually, the Lebanon case is so much more complicated because we have Israel involved on the ground in southern Lebanon. We have guerrilla war going on between Hezbollah and Israel, and no one of them seems to be backing off. Here in the region, we know that Israel wants more land on the Arab lands. They are very greedy, taking lands in Lebanon and in Syria. So any mediation now, of course, Lebanon has huge relations with France and Europe is backing up on Lebanon, and France had a huge effort in communicating the importance of Lebanon in the region, geopolitically, and to France, and Lebanon, to Trump, of course, and Lebanon as a state, and how important it is being on the borders of Israel as well, having a group like Hezbollah who've been trying to resist Israel from the borders, from the common borders. So this vision has been well documented to Trump, and that's why we are witnessing these kind of talks now. But Israel will always be the problem because they also practice a lot of stallments. They don't want any progress unless all of the conditions they have put. Actually, I see that agreement as a little bit unfair to Lebanon, but it's in hope of getting this conflict between Hezbollah and Israel out. And actually, any weapons with Hezbollah is not being actually very accepted by countries in the region, like Egypt, for example. Okay, so the question now is Hezbollah and the state of Lebanon. And then we can see how, and they are contradicting and they don't agree on that deal, and they see it as it takes power of Hezbollah and of Lebanon as a state. But actually, to be honest, there is no hope for the state of Lebanon but being unified still and have a national army without any other malicious group. So it now depends on actually Israel and Hezbollah and how bad this conflict can proceed. But the thing is, Israel is assaulting all of Lebanon, not only where Hezbollah is located. They bomb whole buildings just to kill one element of Hezbollah or to assassinate one element of Hezbollah. This is very vicious and has been well documented to Trump, yes, but a lot of pressure has to be practiced on Israel to back off and to get out of the land of Lebanon, or there will be no hope. Because taking the weapons of Hezbollah can be executed through Arab mediation. It can be done through Iran as well, because Hezbollah is one of the biggest proxy groups of Iran and one of the most powerful, of course, in the Arab states. So if we see the track of the negotiations between Iran and Tehran taking a move forward, maybe we can see the negotiations and this Hezbollah dilemma taking also a step forward with a lot of pressure from the Arab states as well on Hezbollah. If Iran also tells them something positive about giving up their weapons or cooperating with the state of Lebanon. So that's more complicated actually than the war between US and Washington because Israel is involved in the land of Lebanon.
And Sarah, finally, as this broader U.S. Iran negotiating process continues, how important are the optics of every next step for domestic audiences in the two countries and on the global stage?
Well, I believe the domestic audiences, either in U.S. or Iran, if you know what I mean, would hope for this war to end because it's again it's affecting. We have witnessed civil casualties a lot in Iran, starting off by kids, and as well as a lot of panic, a lot of change of opinions in the US, either towards Israel or either towards the American war itself against Iran has raised a lot of questions between the people of the states. It actually has turned against the Trump administration itself, this kind of war, because people have been asking why? Why are we going into this war to force a country and to give up on its nuclear program that they have already had a deal with? They had a deal already with Iran before, and Trump backed off from that deal. So people are raising questions now in the US. And it's very legitimate to ask this question because we previously had a deal and we had peace and everything was going okay. Either we like the regime in Iran or not, but everything was going towards a better world and not towards a war. And now that things that have gone through all of that and through all that destruction and fear and panic, people are hoping for this war to end either here or in the broader region.
Indeed, everyone hopes for the end of war. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us on Primetime and sharing your analysis and views. All right, after a short break, we'll take a closer look at a new energy route across the Caspian that could connect Central Asia's renewable power to European markets. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. A new energy route across the Caspian could soon link Central Asia's renewable power to European markets. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan are pushing ahead with a green electricity corridor that would place Baku at the center of the connection.
Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan are advancing plans for a Caspian green energy corridor that could carry renewable electricity from Central Asia to Europe. The project stems from an agreement signed by the three countries' leaders in Baku in November 2024. It's centered on a planned submarine cable across the Caspian Sea, linking Central Asia's renewable energy sector with Azerbaijan and onward to Europe. Azerbaijan is expected to serve as the main gateway to European markets. The country is already working with Georgia, Romania, and Hungary on a 1,500-kilometer Black Sea submarine cable project that could help carry Central Asian power to European consumers. The Asian Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank signed an agreement with the energy ministries of Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan in April 2025 to support the corridor's feasibility study. Italian consulting and engineering company CEASE has begun work on the study, which is estimated to cost around €1 million. The study will assess whether the corridor is technically and commercially viable. The project aims to integrate up to 5 gigawatts of capacity by 2030. The three countries have also created the Green Corridor Alliance, registered in Baku in July 2025, to oversee implementation. The feasibility study is expected to be completed in May 2027. The project comes as Central Asian countries expand renewable energy production. Kazakhstan has around 3.7 gigawatts of renewable capacity, while Uzbekistan is targeting a sharp increase in clean energy by 2030. Azerbaijan has more than 2 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity, including 65 hydropower plants, 6 wind farms, and 9 solar power plants. Renewables account for around 20.8% of Azerbaijan's total installed electricity capacity. For Europe, the corridor fits into efforts to diversify energy supplies, import more low-carbon electricity, and strengthen energy security.
Well, I'm joined now in the studio by A News' Nigar Shirinova to take us through the facts behind the Caspian Green Energy Corridor. Nigar, thank you so much for joining me here in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me here in our studio.
Let's start with the basics. What is the Caspian Green Energy Corridor and why are Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Azerbaijan building it right now?
Yes, Andy. So the Caspian Green Energy Corridor is a very important major energy project that aims to transport green electricity from Central Asia to Europe. And here, if we look at this, if we see this in simple terms, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they have a huge potential to produce the wind and solar energy. But in their domestic market, domestically it's not as much as to absorb this future production. So they look for new markets. And in this time, we see the Europe here. On the other hand, Europe is looking for more diversified partners, and Europe is looking for new partners which will have their energy security. And here, when Azerbaijan comes in, and so Azerbaijan is in this project is having a potential great role to merge and to be the bridge between the two regions, Central Asia and Europe. And the three countries, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, they in November 2024 they agreed and they signed to create a system which will make this bridge, which will make this potential bridge to happen, so it will merge the Central Asia with Europe through the Caspian Sea and Azerbaijan. And it's very important because the timing is also very important, by the way. If you ask why, there are three main reasons which we can see from the situations, from the news which are happening right now. So the first reason is, of course, for Europe. After 2022, specifically since the Russia-Ukraine conflict happened, Europe is looking for new partners, more reliable partners, which can get guarantee for its energy security, let's say. And also the second reason could be Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, their potential of the solar and wind energy, solar plants. So they have a huge, great potential. And of course, for Azerbaijan to be the transit and to connect these two regions. For the connectivity, it's very important because Azerbaijan is already doing this with the Southern Gas Corridor, and now it's more about the green electricity, green energy, and going towards more safe environment, more green.
Well, as you mentioned, Azerbaijan appears to be the key link in this corridor. What would Baku's exact role be in delivering renewables from Central Asia to Europe? Yeah,
Baku's, Azerbaijan's key role here is to link this. It plays the central role here because without Azerbaijan, this project will not happen, cannot happen, because Azerbaijan there is in the middle and it's the connector of these two regions. And it's the transit between these two regions, and Azerbaijan is already doing this with the Southern Gas Corridor. It's not something something new for Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is exporting the gas, oil and gas, but now it's going, it's a potential for diversifying for Azerbaijan as well, more towards the green energy and transporting the green electricity. So for Azerbaijan, it's also very important. It's something new, and it would benefit Azerbaijan economically because it's something new. It will be more new investment, electricity investment to Azerbaijan, economic benefit of Azerbaijan. Politically, it's also important for Azerbaijan because it will deliver from Central Asia to Europe. So Europe will be partner to Azerbaijan. Europe's energy security will be dependent on Azerbaijan as well. So we will be partners, and strategically also we can say that it's important for Baku because now it will not transport only oil and gas, but it will be also the green electricity. So that's why it's very important.
This plan envisions laying a submarine cable across the Caspian Sea. How exactly would that work, and what is to be connected there?
Yeah. So this, the Caspian Sea submarine cable, it's a cable which goes along the, it's laid in the bottom line of the Caspian Sea. It connects Kazakhstan to Azerbaijan through the Caspian Sea. And the role of that cable is actually to connect Kazakhstan to Azerbaijan, and there in the Central Asia, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan are connected by their regional connections. So the solar and wind plants that they are going through their region to Kazakhstan, and from Kazakhstan by that submarine cable is coming to Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan is connecting it to Europe through the Georgia and the cable that's like a southern gas corridor. It's going to Romania and from there to Europe. So that's a cable which is important, and it goes through the it connects Central Asia to Europe through Azerbaijan, Caspian Sea and Azerbaijan.
And now that you've told us about the Black Sea cable as well, linking Azerbaijan to Georgia, Romania and Hungary, how big of a part of the entire plan is that second Black Sea cable?
Yeah, actually it's very crucial to understand this because these are two interconnected projects, the Caspian Sea and Black Sea cables, because they are actually interdependent and they complement each other. The Caspian Sea is first half of it, first half of the project, and the Black Sea is the second half of the project, if we can say it in this way. So with the Caspian Sea, it only connects Kazakhstan to Azerbaijan through the Caspian Sea, and the second half is done by the Black Sea cable, which is going through and it's done with the help of Georgia and Romania, Hungary. It's the project of Azerbaijan, Georgia, Hungary, and Romania. So it's the second half of the project is from Azerbaijan. It goes to Georgia and Georgia Black Sea, from there to Romania and to the networks of Europe, electricity networks of Europe. So this is the project, how it works. So it's not something two different projects. This is the project that is interconnected and they complement each other. So they are like first half and the second half.
And finally, Nigar, what are we waiting for when it comes to this project? What needs to happen for this corridor to become reality?
So right now there is a feasibility study which is happening because actually we spoke about the Caspian Sea cable. This is not something new. It's already done in some European countries, like they have in Norway, in United Kingdom, in Denmark, and if we speak technically, it's not something new, and the question is not if it will work or not. Technically, it will work if it will be done there. So the feasibility study is now studying is aiming to get the answer of if financially it will be beneficial to do this if the European will have that kind of demand, so that project can happen and investment will happen or not. And also because in this project, the feasibility study will end in May of 2027, next year, and the funding is investment is done by the Asian Development Bank and Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And it studies the question of who will fund this project. Is it really worth going for this project or not? Because Europe will have this kind of demand to have this kind of cable or not? And how much will this project cost to these three countries? So these all are the questions which needs to be studied, and we will see the results hopefully by May of next year, 2027. Technically, of course, it's possible, but these answers to these questions are very crucial at this stage. And if the study will be positive, these three countries, they agreed that to get up to 5 gigawatts, if I'm not mistaken, by 2030. This is the goal. And actually, this is very important for the wider region because this is a very ambitious project to connect the regions. And if the study will be positive, it's really good for the wider region.
Well, that's a lot of green power in the guy.
Yes.
Very interesting stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Andi.
All right, after a short break, we'll take a closer look at the fallout from Pakistani airstrikes in eastern Afghanistan, as the UN warns the civilian death toll could still rise. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime. The United Nations says number of civilian casualties could rise after Pakistani airstrikes hit parts of eastern Afghanistan. The strikes have triggered growing international concern, as Kabul warns it will respond at what it calls an appropriate time. Tamim Bahis has the details in Kabul.
The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan says the numbers of casualties could rise as hospitals continue to treat the injured after Sunday's airstrike by Pakistan. According to the UN, the deadliest strike took place at around 11:30 p.m. local time in Chamkane district of Paktia province, where at least 22 civilians were killed and 47 others injured. 6 civilians were killed in Paktika's Gyan district and 2 children were injured in Kunar's Marawara district. The mission said it is continuing its verification work and has again called for respect for international humanitarian law, including the principles of precaution, distinction and proportionality. There's also been strong international reaction. The UK Special Representative for Afghanistan, Richard Lindsay, said he was deeply concerned by the continuing violence and a loss of life, while UN Special Rapporteur Richard Bennett expressed concern over the attack and called for restraint, civilian protection and accountability. The European Union has also called for the full protection of civilians and an immediate de-escalation of tensions. UNICEF said they were deeply concerned by reports that children were among those affected. Meanwhile, the spokesperson of the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said the Secretary General is deeply concerned by the violence between Afghanistan and Pakistan, calling for an immediate end to hostilities and urging both sides to resolve differences through diplomacy. Afghanistan government spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid has told local media that Kabul will respond to the attack at what he called an appropriate time, describing the expected response as crushing, but giving no further details. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Meanwhile, Pakistan is taking a harder line with Afghanistan after a deadly attack on its security forces in Karachi. Islamabad has issued a formal protest to Kabul and says it has targeted militant hideouts, while the Taliban denies Afghan territory is being used for attacks. Mariam Zia reports from Islamabad.
Pakistan is signaling a harder line on cross-border militancy, combining military retaliation with direct diplomatic pressure on Afghanistan. On Monday, Islamabad summoned Afghanistan's Chargé Affairs and issued a formal démarche after Sunday's attack on a Pakistan Rangers camp in Karachi. Pakistan says 3 Rangers personnel were killed and 4 were wounded. Authorities say 3 attackers were killed, while one suspected attacker, identified as an Afghan national, was captured alive. Foreign Office spokesperson Tahir Andrabi said, "The evidence showed, and I quote, Afghan soil and Afghan nationals continue to be used to orchestrate terrorist attacks inside Pakistan," unquote. Pakistan's ambassador in Kabul delivered an identical protest to the Taliban administration on the same day. Earlier, Islamabad announced intelligence-based operations in Bajor and what it described as precision strikes on militant hideouts in Paktia, Paktika, and Kunar, saying 29 militants, including a senior Jamaat al-Ahrar commander, were killed. However, the Taliban says residential areas were hit, while the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan reports that 28 civilians were killed and 49 were injured, including women and children. The latest developments point to a broader shift in Pakistan's response to cross-border militancy, combining military action with diplomatic engagement. As Islamabad presses Taliban to act against groups it says operate from Afghan territory. This is an allegation Kabul continues to reject. Whether Islamabad's approach reduces militant violence or further deepens tensions between the neighbors remain uncertain. Mariam Sia, A News.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the latest from Ukraine as fresh attacks are reported and both Kyiv and Moscow dig in over the course of the war. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. The Russia-Ukraine war continues with attacks reported across several Ukrainian cities. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Moscow has repeatedly failed to achieve its battlefield goals, while Russia says it will continue its military campaign.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Russia has repeatedly failed to meet its military objectives in eastern Ukraine as Russian strikes killed at least 10 people across several regions on Monday. In his nightly address, Zelenskyy said the Kremlin had set 15 deadlines since the start of the full-scale invasion to capture Ukraine's Donetsk region, but had postponed each of them.
This year, they have again postponed the date. First it was March 31st, then September 1st, and now the latest deadline is December 31st. If Russia does not end its war, it will have to postpone that deadline once again.
Russia has not publicly responded to Zelenskyy's remarks. President Vladimir Putin said over the weekend that Russian forces would continue their offensive and seek full control of the 4 Ukrainian regions that Moscow claims to have annexed. The Kremlin has also reiterated that its conditions for ending the war remain unchanged. Meanwhile, Ukrainian authorities reported a series of Russian attacks across the country. In Dnipro, regional officials said a missile strike on a private business killed at least 5 people and injured 28 others. In Zaporizhia, officials said a Russian drone struck a passenger minibus, killing 3 people and injuring 6 others, including a child. In Kharkiv, local authorities said a guided bomb attack killed a 23-year-old woman and injured 12 others. Russia has not commented on the reported attacks. Both Moscow and Kyiv deny deliberately targeting civilians, although civilians have been killed throughout the conflict.
The European Commission has released 3.9 billion euros to help Ukraine buy drones. The payment, announced today, is the first part of a 6 billion euro package under the bloc's 90 billion euro Ukraine support loan. More funding for drones will follow in the coming days, with later payments also covering ammunition, missiles, and air defense systems. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the funding will strengthen Ukraine's defense and Europe's security. Well, let's bring in our guest, Mariam Kintsurashvili, a strategic communication expert joining us from Valencia. Mariam, welcome. Great to have you on Primetime. Let's start with Ukraine's campaign of hitting Russian oil facilities. It has already triggered fuel shortages in Russia and price spikes. The Kremlin even said today that Russia is in talks with other countries to import fuel at acceptable prices. Could this war become too expensive for Russia?
Hello, Andy. Thanks for having me. Yes, but we need to understand that Russia will not go bankrupt overnight. But due to Ukraine's campaign against Russian oil and fuel facilities, we see already that the Ukraine's strategy is quite successful to cut Crimea off, and the war definitely is becoming strategically, narratively, economically, and logistically more costly to sustain for Russia, of course. So these strikes against Russian oil infrastructure are quite important because they hit the core of their military system at the battlefield, because even like a small infantry unit cannot move because they need supplies, logistics, even tanks and weapons and ammunition cannot be sustained without the fuel. From the other perspective, from the economic perspective, we are already seeing discontent among the Russian population, and even the ban on social media could not possibly stop that wave of discontent. But what's very important here is the narrative damage, strategic communications damage to Russia, because historically Russian population have positioned themselves as the leader, as basically ruler of the Eurasian continent, and with endless resources, endless human capacity. Basically, they have been known for decades as the gas station of Europe, and now this gas station has to import oil, and they are importing, which is much lower quality, which is a huge narrative damage for them, the narrative damage to the whole mythology of Russia being like the leader and undefeatable. So we will see. As of now, the strategy was successful.
Well, the EU has transferred almost 4 billion euros to Ukraine to fund drone procurement. Are those funds enough for Ukraine to sustain its strategy right now, and for how long?
So when it comes to drone strategy, it's been quite successful and one of the most efficient strategies of Ukraine. So for now, this 3.9 billion support, of course, it's not enough to sustain the whole war effort. However, for the drones, it's extremely important. It will help Ukraine buy more drones, but also it will help them with technological advancement, which, in my opinion, in future will form the way Europe and West and all Ukraine's allies are looking at the new strategies of modern war. However, it's very important to note that Ukraine doesn't only depend on drones. They need, which is the most vital, air defense to protect civilians, because Russia keeps attacking civilians on a daily basis. Even just a couple of hours ago, they shelled the kindergarten in Zaporizhia. So, of course, air defense has always been a big problem for Ukraine, but also long-range missiles. And what's very important, predictable financing patterns from Ukraine's allies. This 3.9 billion is a good step, and it sends correct signals to Russia, I suppose.
And Mariam, on those air defense systems and long-range missiles, there's a NATO summit coming up in Ankara. Do you expect Kiev's allies to discuss the war, maybe pledge more support for Ukraine?
Yes, absolutely, and it's already been partially announced that Ukraine most probably will, also Ukrainian delegation will take part there. And I'm not expecting any significant breakthrough in terms of integration. However, I do expect more decisions made on the military and defense cooperation, more support. What's important for Ukraine really is whether the NATO allies on with their statements, or the statements will turn into some really concrete mechanism. That's what I optimistically expect from the summit.
And Mariam, a bit earlier you touched on discontent within Russia. We got some interesting numbers published today. According to a Gallup survey, economic pessimism among Russians is at its highest in at least 20 years. Now, this poll was conducted before these fuel supply disruptions. Could that sentiment translate into something else, perhaps?
It's a good question. So in authoritarian regimes like that, such discontent is almost always suppressed. And like throughout the long reign of Putin and his Siloviki, they certainly have a mechanism to counter this. However, what these strikes did, and what's the most important, for the first time since the start of the full-scale invasion, even earlier, since 2014, Russian population started to feel it inside their homes, inside households, families, because fuel is not abstract. And it's about money, it's about economy, it's about their summer holidays, and we can see lots of Russians posting videos on TikTok and their Russian social media, how hard for them it is to cope, that they don't understand why this is going on. So yeah, for the first time, Ukraine managed to bring it back home, because like you would think in a normal society that such huge military casualties affected them, but it's been lasted for so long, and there was not much discontent, and even if it was not visible. But these fuel shortages definitely show that yes, there is something going on there. I can't say that it will lead to some sort of rebellion, and the mechanism of countering any type of coup is quite strong in Russia. However, if elites feel affected, then we can talk about something bigger here.
And finally, Mariam, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the role of the United States. Do you expect Washington to return to its mediation role if and when it wraps up a deal with Iran?
Well, possibly. And also, for the first time since the second term of President Trump, we can hear the complete change in rhetoric. Even Marco Rubio praising Ukraine as the strongest army in Europe, and President Trump acknowledging Ukraine's successes, which is quite unfamiliar for us. We've been observing this for months and months. The problem here is that the elections period is about to start in America. And Russia will definitely use their hybrid warfare tactics, and they are really the best in the world in those tactics to influence public opinion in America, especially the Trump's base, MAGA base. And we can already see how much they influence people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, because recently traveled to Moscow, Jeffrey Sachs, maybe from a little bit different perspective, but we can see how much effort and how much money Russia puts into steering the public opinion and creating chaos even within the Republican Party, within the MAGA base. So a lot will depend on that. As of now, I'm carefully optimistic, cautiously optimistic about the messages we are getting from the U.S. Of course, I think that post-Iran, because now President Trump is very much focused on the Middle East. He might want to revert to go back to mediation in Ukraine to achieve another successful deal. However, Ukraine has to be really cautious because, as we've said before, the just peace, like Ukraine needs just peace and not only enforcement of some sort of deal which might not be in the best interest of Ukraine. And Ukraine now is in a position to be able to negotiate.
Mariam, thank you kindly for joining us on Primetime and sharing your insight.
Thank you, Andy.
Coming up, we take a closer look at a Board of Peace summit in Cyprus, where officials are set to discuss Gaza's reconstruction and future governance. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Cyprus will host a two-day summit of the Board of Peace, bringing together international officials to discuss Gaza's reconstruction and governance. The meeting is expected to include members of the Board of Peace's Executive Board, representatives from the Palestinian-run committee overseeing Gaza's administration, and officials from the Office of Envoy for Gaza, Nikolai Mladenov. According to officials, the gathering is part of the board's regular meetings, while some European officials have described it as a potential reset in efforts to advance post-war planning. Well, joining us now is former U.S. diplomat Matthew Bryza to talk on the Board of Peace and will it have any merit. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on Primetime. Now, with the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran dominating the conversation over the past few months, do you see this Cyprus gathering as an opportunity to hit that proverbial reset button and push on with peace efforts?
Yeah, thanks for having me with you. Of course, it's such an opportunity. I mean, it's, this isn't out of the ordinary meeting, though. This has been scheduled as part of the kind of nuts and bolts process of committees meeting and developing action plans. And, that National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, it's located in Cairo. It's not unable to go to Gaza. They've had some workshops in Cairo. So we're still in the very early phases of the process. And I think it's indisputably moved slower than would be expected because the prime mover of the whole thing was President Donald Trump. And, well, he decided to become occupied with the U.S. and Israeli war on Iran since last February 28th.
And Matthew, as you've put it, the Palestinian technocrats are yet to enter Gaza. Hamas is yet to be disarmed. And Israel is taking control of an increasingly large percentage of the Gaza Strip. Has this pause in the activities of the board and its bodies drained the initial momentum?
Yeah, so I don't engage with the board, and I don't know the extent to which these technical discussions have been going. I know, as I said, there have been workshops happening at the technical level in Cairo, in particular, and so I think there wasn't necessarily a pause in terms of the bureaucratic work of the board. But certainly there has been one at the highest political level. And to be honest, I mean, from the very beginning, I feared that President Trump would quickly lose interest in this initiative. I mean, he had that grand gathering with so many heads of state, including President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia. And there was such interest in Bulgarian former diplomat Mladenov leading the process. And as we know, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair is a key member of the board, and his institute is helping to provide assistance. But I think for sure that the lack of President Trump's personal engagement has slowed momentum. But I'm not sure he would have been showing a whole lot of interest had he not chosen that war on Iran.
And when it comes to the situation on the ground, since the ceasefire took hold in October, more than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed in the Strip, according to Gaza's health officials. Israel says 5 of its soldiers have been killed. With such numbers and in such circumstances, is this a genuine ceasefire, do you think?
Well, I mean, all ceasefires, in my experience, including a mediation of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, involve shootings. Unfortunately, a ceasefire is always sort of a misnomer because there are some incidents going on. But 1,000 killed since the ceasefire supposedly began, that is a very high number. And for the Palestinians in Gaza whose families, friends, neighbors are being killed, it really does not seem like a ceasefire. And we know that it's been very slow going in terms of the assistance that's supposed to come in at much higher volumes under phase one. The medical system is still under duress. I also have learned in my experience mediating conflicts that there are two sides to the shootings. So yes, the Israelis have been continuing their attacks in Gaza, but there presumably are also attacks by Hamas against the Israeli forces. And one thing I forgot to answer in your last question is there are now reports that Hamas is talking about moving toward disarmament in terms of giving up its heavy weapons, maybe retaining its Kalashnikovs, but looking for ways to maybe move toward a de-escalation of its military capacity.
And if we see those positive developments on the ground, how big a steps can we expect to even see before the fall elections in Israel?
Yeah, that's the key point. I think not very big steps. Prime Minister Netanyahu knows that his political supporters do still support Israeli operations as they have been in Gaza. I mean, right after October 7th, there was near universal political support in Israel for strong retaliation against Hamas. But now that basically the large swath of Israeli society that is opposing Netanyahu, I think as they learn about what the Israeli military has actually done in Gaza, is against the war and want the war to end. So in that situation, there's not a clear, unambiguous push to end the war. And as we know, it's in Prime Minister Netanyahu's personal interests, both political and his own legal interests, that the war continue. So that, number one, on the personal side, his corruption trial doesn't proceed. And number two, on the political side, so that it doesn't become an issue in the very tight election campaign that Israel has failed to achieve its strategic goals in Gaza, which would be a political setback for Netanyahu. Instead, he can say, well, the operation is continuing, and we will achieve our strategic goals ultimately.
And Matthew, there has been some fresh controversy regarding the Board of Peace. The Guardian published what it says is a leaked draft resolution on, let me quote it here, granting legal immunity to the Board of Peace, its members, staff, contractors, and associated forces for actions in the Gaza Strip. The purported draft also permits the board to obtain Palestinian public property free of charge. This is still unconfirmed, of course, but what implications could such measures have?
Well, the details matter, right? And it's standard procedure that international organization employees and of course foreign diplomats, but people involved in international peace operations or reconstruction operations have some degree of immunity from criminality. Not always, and that needs to be negotiated. And it's in the case of status of forces agreements involving U.S. military forces, that's always a big issue. Do the U.S. military forces in a foreign country acquire immunity from prosecution for criminal acts? So again, why we would need to understand why the Board of Peace is requesting immunity for its members. I mean, presumably the whole reason why the Board of Peace was formed, right, was to advance a peace agreement, which means a sense of justice among all of the parties to the war in Gaza. So I personally would want to know what the justification is for the diplomatic community. And on property acquisition, again, the details matter. So after the Second World War, the United States, as I guess as well, you could say an occupying power, along with the Soviet Union, France, and the United Kingdom of Germany, all of them were granted by the defeated government of Germany and the new government of Germany property for diplomatic missions. So is that what we're talking about here, or is this some sort of a property grab for business and real estate development reasons? If it's the latter, that's absolutely unacceptable. I really hope that these properties in question would be used for diplomatic operations of the Board of Peace.
Matthew, thank you so much for joining us on Primetime and sharing your insight.
My pleasure.
All right, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. European and Chinese officials have concluded a new round of economic discussions in Brussels, setting out the framework for continued engagement ahead of their next meeting in Beijing. Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to this day in Europe, where the EU and China wrap up high-stakes trade talks in Brussels with an agreement to step up negotiations before October's meeting in Beijing. EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič and Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao agreed to establish 4 working groups covering trade imbalances, export controls, intellectual property, and World Trade Organization reform. The EU continued to press China over what it calls unfair trade practices, including China's record trade surplus with the bloc, limited market access for European companies, and export restrictions on rare earth minerals that have disrupted European supply chains. China, meanwhile, urged Brussels to ease restrictions on Chinese companies and advanced tech exports, warning that protectionist measures threaten economic cooperation. Šefčovič said he wants to see tangible results in the coming months for Europe, warning that China's exports to Europe continue to grow while the bloc's market share in China keeps shrinking. The EU's goods trade deficit with China reached a whopping 360 billion euros last year, up 15% from 2024 and widened by another 10% in the first quarter of this year. Šefčovič said that trend is not sustainable and that the status quo is not an option. China did assure the bloc that its rare earth export controls would not disrupt European industrial supply chains, but despite the constructive tone, fundamental differences remain, and those differences extend far beyond the negotiating table. France has been pushing for a tougher response to what it sees as unfair Chinese trade practices, while Germany and Spain favor a more cautious approach to protect their extensive economic ties with Beijing. Forging a common European position may prove almost as challenging as negotiating with China itself. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Britain is preparing for a major increase in defense spending as the government sets out plans to reshape its armed forces for a more dangerous world. The package includes new money for drones, advanced weapons systems, and long-term military programs. A News' Zainab Farajzadeh reports.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has unveiled the government's long-awaited defence investment plan, describing it as a generational transformation of Britain's armed forces. He said the plan would make the UK safer in an increasingly unstable world. The government will invest an additional £15 billion in defence over the next 4 years. Annual defence spending is expected to rise from around £54 billion to almost £80 billion by 2029, a real terms increase of about 27%, according to the Prime Minister. To help fund the increase, Starmer said some infrastructure projects, including road and energy schemes, would be delayed or scrapped. He said the government was prioritising national security and would make savings through capital budgets rather than additional borrowing. A key part of the plan is more than £5 billion for drones and autonomous systems, the largest investment of its kind in UK military history. The funding will support new drones, autonomous naval systems, and advanced technology across the armed forces. The plan also includes investment in the UK's nuclear deterrent, future combat aircraft, and the Global Combat Air Programme with Italy and Japan to develop next-generation fighter jets. Starmer said the plan reflects lessons learned from recent conflicts, including the war in Ukraine. The government says that package will support around 60,000 jobs across the UK, strengthening both national security and the wider economy. Zainab Farizata, News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
A conference in Baku has put renewed focus on one of Azerbaijan's most painful unresolved issues, the fate of thousands of people still missing after years of conflict. Alongside the diplomacy, officials unveiled a new anonymous reporting tool designed to help locate mass graves and bring long-awaited answers to families. Leila Rahimli picked up the story.
Baku hosted a major international conference today, bringing together foreign ambassadors, diplomats and international experts. But behind the formal protocols, the core of this meeting was very human. It was about finding answers for over 4,000 Azerbaijani families who still have no idea what happened to their loved ones. What made today's event important was the shift toward practical solutions. The International Commission on Missing Persons introduced the new digital platform here, featuring an incognito reporting tool. The idea is to allow anyone, including individuals on the Armenian side, to anonymously share coordinates of information about mass graves under total confidentiality.
People will be able to, number one, families of the missing go online to report a missing person and receive an update on the status of their cases. And number two, people can then report the possible location of these sites, and they can do this also anonymously. So I think this will be a very effective tool in increasing the amount and quantity of data that Azerbaijan will have available to enhance its process to locate and identify missing persons. So we believe that this is a very important step towards modernizing the technical capabilities of Azerbaijan, and it opens the door also for improved cooperation between Azerbaijan and Armenia to be able to share data. And that is absolutely critical, not only for the process of finding missing persons, but ensuring peace and stability in the region.
The data presented to the international guests today show why this matters so much right now. Since the territories were liberated, 32 mass graves have been uncovered and over 320 victims have been identified through DNA matching.
Following the Second Karabakh War, 32 mass graves have been discovered in the liberated territories of Azerbaijan. As a result of search and identification efforts conducted to date, the remains of 893 individuals have been uncovered and exhumed. Among them, the identities of 327 people have been established through DNA and forensic examinations, and the remains of 226 individuals have been handed over to their families for burial.
The technical capability is clearly ready, but as we just heard, the process now depends on closing the remaining data gaps. Well, that's all from us. This is Leila Rahimli with Natik Mammadov behind the camera for A News.
Still in Azerbaijan, senior officials responsible for religious affairs across the Organization of Turkic States are meeting in Shusha for the first time, in a sign of growing coordination across the Turkic world. The gathering is expected to focus on closer cooperation in religious affairs, shared values, and joint efforts against extremism. Chimnaz Shahlar sent us this report.
For the first time, senior officials responsible for religious affairs from across the Organization of Turkic States are meeting in Shusha. The meeting brings together the OTS Secretary General along with senior officials from Azerbaijan, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. Discussions focus on preserving the shared spiritual and cultural values of the Turkic world and expanding cooperations between the member states. Participants are also discussing state-religion relations, legislation, public awareness and professional training in the field of religious affairs. Another key topic is the protection and international promotion of the Turkic world's shared religious and cultural heritage, as well as stronger cooperation against religious radicalism and extremism. A major item on the agenda is the creation of permanent cooperation mechanism between the member states' religious affairs institutions. The meeting is expected to conclude with the signing of a joint communique outlining the agreed areas of cooperation. I'm Chimnaz Shahlar with Khalid Aliyev reporting from Shusha for A News.
Kyrgyzstan is tightening oversight of fuel supplies as regional instability raises concerns over deliveries and prices. The government says it wants closer monitoring of imports and faster coordination to reduce the risk of shortages in a market heavily reliant on outside supply. Sevilla Rajapova picked up the story for us.
Kyrgyzstan has announced a strict oversight of its fuel supplies as the government moves to safeguard the domestic market against potential disruptions. During the government meeting chaired by Chairman of the Cabinet of Ministers Adilbek Kasimaliyev, officials reviewed current fuel reserves and supply conditions. Authorities said geopolitical developments continue to complicate logistics and put pressure on fuel prices across the region. Kyrgyzstan imports most of its petroleum products, with Russia its main supplier. The country consumes around 1.5 million tons of fuel annually, making stable supply chains critical for transport, agriculture and the wider economy. The government says it's also working to diversify fuel imports, with officials saying new supply arrangements have already been secured to help maintain market stability. Following the meeting, the cabinet instructed relevant agencies to introduce daily monitoring of fuel deliveries and submit regular operational reports. Weekly coordination meetings will also be held to respond more quickly to potential risks and help prevent shortages. It is Sevilla Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Chinese manufacturers are seeing a sharp rise in export demand as Europe's heat wave lifts orders for cooling products and U.S. retailers stock up ahead of possible tariff hikes. The jump is giving factories and shippers a boost on two key trade routes at the same time. Mahnur Makhdoom has more.
Chinese manufacturers are reporting a sharp rise in exports to Europe as a record heat wave drives demand for cooling products. Exports of portable air conditioners from China to Western Europe surged more than 70% in the first 5 months of this year, with shipments to France, the Netherlands and Belgium more than doubling from a year earlier. Manufacturer media said that its plant in Guangdong province is operating around the clock to keep up with demand, with units being rushed to continent via China-Europe freight trains to catch the remaining summer season. At the same time, shipping companies say that U.S. retailers have brought forward orders by 4 to 6 weeks to ensure inventories arrive in time for Black Friday and Christmas shopping. Importers are seeking to avoid the impact of expected U.S. tariff increase later this year, prompting an early surge in cargo volumes on trans-Pacific shipping routes. Together, the surge in orders is providing a boost to Chinese manufacturers, exporters and international shipping companies. Manu Masoom, A News, Beijing.
All right, after a short break, we'll take a look at more top stories of the day. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. The humanitarian crisis in Venezuela is deepening after last week's deadly twin earthquakes. Thousands remain missing, emergency shelters are filling up, and rescue crews are still racing against time. Here's the latest.
The search for survivors is continuing across northern Venezuela, 5 days after powerful twin earthquakes devastated the country. The official death toll has risen to more than 1,700 people, and tens of thousands of people are still believed to be missing. Rescue teams from 30 countries have joined the operation. Emergency crews continue to search collapsed buildings in La Guaira, Miranda, and Caracas.
We continue our efforts to rescue survivors, which fills us with emotion and hope for their families and for our people, who are witnessing the tireless work of Venezuela's rescue teams and the international brigades.
Despite the international response, many communities say government help has been slow to arrive. In the port city of La Guaira, one of the worst hit areas, families and neighbours are still digging through the rubble with crowbars, pickaxes, and even their bare hands in the hope of finding loved ones.
Now our loved ones are there, and we don't know if they're alive, if they're dead, or if they're eating, if they've fainted. We don't know anything, and that's painful for us. I'm at peace because I have my children, but I cry every day. I haven't slept in 3 days.
We're tired, holding on, heartbroken. We're exhausted by all of this, completely worn out.
Tell me who's going to take our place, our family members who are still there. Because yes, there was hope until last night. We pulled people out alive last night. We're desperate because there are surely still people in there.
The two earthquakes, measuring 7.2 and 7.5, struck just 39 seconds apart last Wednesday, causing widespread destruction and bringing down nearly 800 buildings. Hundreds of displaced people are now living in temporary shelters. In Karabaleda, a golf course has been turned into a camp where families are sleeping in makeshift tents with limited facilities, as authorities work to provide emergency housing for those who have lost everything.
Police in Monaco and France are searching for a suspect after a parcel bomb exploded outside an apartment building in Monaco, injuring 3 members of the same family. Investigators believe the suspect fled on foot into neighboring France. 2 sources identified the main victim as Ukrainian-born businessman Vadim Yermolayev. His partner suffered serious injuries while their son was also hurt, but is reported to be in less serious condition. Monaco prosecutor Stéphane Thibault said the investigation has been opened on charges of attempted assassination and placing an explosive device in a public place.
This is an investigation on flagrancy, opened on the charges of attempted assassination and of placing substances or explosive devices on the public roadway. This is therefore not a terrorist qualification, and I insist on that. We do not, for the moment, have the elements to make this qualification. I am, however, in contact with the French anti-terrorism public prosecutor, which has already offered its services.
Peru's election authority has completed its final vote tally, putting Keiko Fujimori on course to become the country's next president. She secured just over 50% of the vote to Roberto Sanchez's 49.86. The former First Lady welcomed the outcome, saying she would await the official declaration with humility and responsibility. Sanchez has rejected the result, alleging electoral fraud without providing evidence. He says he will file a legal appeal before Peru's National Electoral Jury officially proclaims the winner on the July 3rd. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill aimed at improving online safety for children. The measure won support from both Democrats and Republicans in a vote of 267 to 117. It would require online platforms to give young users and parents tools to limit addictive features. Companies would also have to take steps to protect children from risks such as sexual exploitation. The vote comes as lawmakers face growing pressure to address the impact of social media on young people. A self-exiled Chinese billionaire has been sentenced to 30 years in a U.S. prison after being convicted of defrauding investors of more than $1 billion. A jury in New York found Guo Wengui guilty of multiple charges, including fraud and money laundering. Guo, also known as Miles Guo and Ho Wang-kwok, fled China in 2015 after facing fraud allegations there. In the United States, he became a well-known critic of China's Communist Party and worked closely with former Trump advisor Steve Bannon on a political movement opposing the Chinese government. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has reported more than 1,300 confirmed Ebola cases, including 377 deaths. The government has now banned public gatherings in 4 provinces, including the capital, Kinshasa, as it battles the outbreak. The restrictions come ahead of a planned protest on July 8th against constitutional reform, with opposition figures calling the move politically motivated. South Africa has stepped up its security ahead of planned marches against undocumented immigration amid fears of violence in Durban and Johannesburg. Some Malawian nationals have already left ahead of a June 30th deadline. Authorities say extra police are in place to maintain order, while officials say security forces will protect demonstrators, residents, and infrastructure. A National Statistics Office survey in 2023 showed there were 3.1 million migrants in South Africa, equivalent to about 4.1% of the population. 6 people have been killed in a shooting at a youth welfare facility in the northern German town of Stade, near Hamburg. Police say a suspect has been arrested and a firearm recovered, with authorities describing the incident as a domestic-related attack.
6 people have been killed in a shooting at a youth welfare facility in the northern German town of Stade, near Hamburg. Police said the perpetrator and another person were arrested shortly afterwards. Authorities said emergency services were called to the scene after reports of gunfire shortly after midday on Monday. The area was quickly cordoned off as armed police units and forensic teams were deployed. Witnesses described a rapid police response and the moment officers intercepted the suspect's vehicle nearby.
We saw the police vehicles here and at first thought it was just a normal road accident. Then we just heard that several police cars were coming from all directions, some of them at high speed. At first, we tried to work out what on earth had happened until we saw the other police vehicles. They just told us to get to safety.
Police said the victims were employees of the facility, not residents or children. Investigators said the suspect initially fled the scene in a car before being apprehended in a swift police operation. Lower Saxony Interior Minister Daniela Behrens said the attack appears to have been motivated by personal circumstances.
According to the information available so far, this was a crime committed for family reasons, an act of violence carried out in an extremely cold-blooded manner with no political or economic motives. Thanks to the swift and decisive action of the police officers, the suspected shooter was arrested shortly after the incident. He is currently in police custody. A firearm was seized at the time of his arrest.
Police said the suspect had a prior record in relation to threats, but was not previously considered highly dangerous. And the motive is believed to be linked to a custody dispute involving the suspect's infant daughter, who was inside the building at the time, but was unharmed.
Well, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching and join us again tomorrow. From all of us here at A News, have a nice evening.